Hello and welcome to another episode of Change One Thing, the show where we explore if tomorrow will really be what tomorrow will be. Hi, it's Larni and it's great to have you with us again. Today on the podcast, I have with me James Mullins, an Associate Professor at Deakin University's Institute for Intelligent Systems Research and Innovation. James is an applied robotics engineer with a background in medical, industrial and first responder robots. He has designed, built and supported robots for Australia's law enforcement and emergency services community. He's also the Chief Technical Officer at Flame Systems. With over 20 years' experience as a firefighter himself, James was a key player in designing Flame Trainer, a virtual reality and augmented reality system for firefighters. James is passionate about providing technology solutions and the ethical, social and personal implications of their introduction. This conversation really shines the light on a world with robots, a world that is not too far away. I hope you find my chat with James as engaging as I did. Let's get into it. Change One Thing with Associate Professor James Mullins. Enjoy. Well, welcome, James. Let's talk robots.
Yeah, let's.
Have you always been fascinated with robotics? And as a young boy, did you sort of envision working in this field?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I can't quite remember it, but apparently in grade 2 in primary school, my parents told me that I wanted to be a part-time robot builder. And I believe it was part-time robot builder, part-time clay sculptor or something. And the sculpting didn't quite take off, but the robotics certainly did. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that was pretty cool as a kid.
I know as a kid my favourite robot movie was Short Circuit's Johnny 5. I absolutely loved that movie. Have we come a long way from that?
Oh, look, that,
in terms of robots?
To me as a young child, that was a documentary. So I used to watch that, and there was a 1980s movie made in Australia called Malcolm about someone that robbed banks using robots, and I don't condone that at all, obviously. But, obviously all the Terminator series and things like that, certainly the pop culture really defines people. So, Star Wars, Star Trek, that kind of stuff helps, science fiction helps to define where we see the future, and is certainly predictive in many ways around where technology goes. And I think it's an interesting question to decide whether or not that drives innovation, because I guess all the engineers aspire to build that kind of tech, or whether it's the other way around, and engineers are really pushing back into pop culture now, I think, as well.
Yeah, it could be a little bit of both, perhaps.
Yeah. Look, and certainly there's a lot in sci-fi that hasn't quite got there yet, I guess. But we'll see.
Do you have robots that can rob banks just quietly?
I do. Well, no.
You do?
No. Hang on, is this thing on? No. So we actually build robots for police and military. So we've sort of gone the complete opposite to that, and
not the bank robbing.
Not the bank robbing.
Oh,
we work on the other side, and it's been great working in that space.
So you've got a background in medical, industrial, and first responder robots.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example for our listeners of each types of these robots and what they do?
Well, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the history of how this evolved. So a lot of technologies are funded by military and police requirements and then filter down into medical and industrial uses. So probably over 10 years ago now, we started work on some robots that could be used for clearing landmines and working on the humanitarian side of landmine reduction. And this was sort of during the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a lot of roadside injuries to soldiers and the public as well. So we developed a robot that we could remotely neutralise or make safe a landmine or a roadside bomb using a technology called Haptics, and that's force feedback. So it enables a person to put their hand in a glove effectively, reach out using their hand and control a robot that might be a kilometre away, and that robot can touch and feel and poke and prod.
Oh, wow.
And, we can literally pick something up, shake it, brush sand off a landmine without detonating it, cut the red wire because, as we all know from the movies, it's always the red wire.
Is it the red or the blue?
Always the red.
Always the red.
Yeah,
okay, I'll keep that in mind just in case I'm ever
exactly.
in that scenario.
And so that technology really defined and was world-leading technology for that field. But then that technology is translated down into the police forces, so the same sort of similar technology in use there, and then into medical. So I've worked on it with a team at Deakin looking at remote ultrasound, for example. So the same technology allows us to perform an ultrasound anywhere in Australia from anywhere in Australia, and touch and feel the patient, see the patient in 3D as if they're in front of you. So
you could be doing an ultrasound on someone in Perth.
Yeah, you could have a specialist in Melbourne performing an ultrasound on someone in the middle of the Northern Territory on a cattle station, for example.
That's amazing. I didn't know. I never thought of that.
I guess I like to say that sort of the technology is no longer the limiting factor in a lot of what we do. It's about just the ideas and the inspiration to create these new technologies and really come up with something new. There's plenty of ideas out there that could be realised quite easily these days.
And I guess like even with medical, a lot of the times now when you go in and have surgery, like often it's, a little robot that is assisting the surgeons as well.
Yeah, there's some great medical robots out there. And in fact, that's another project that's been happening at Deakin is around instrumenting those robots so that a surgeon can feel. So at the moment, the robots are fantastic, but they can't feel the difference in tissue. So if you're trying to remove a tumour, for example, you can't feel, and surgeons do this now, they feel the difference between cancerous tissue and healthy tissue using their senses, their touch. The robots can't do that yet, but over the next 5 to 10 years, I'm sure they will be able to.
So with the use of what you mentioned before, haptics, which is a word I've just learnt today.
We need to try and learn one word every day, right? Yeah.
So can you explain haptics again? And that is what you've just been talking about,
So
isn't it?
haptics is all about touch. So haptics comes from the Greek word touch. And if anyone's played a racing game down at the arcade, Daytona or something like that, where you've got a steering wheel that provides force feedback as you're going around the corner, that's kind of what haptics is. It's giving you a force that doesn't really exist, but it's providing that force feedback to the user so they think that they're touching something.
Yes, okay. And yes, even like we've all played Mario Kart.
Yeah, the rumble packs and all that sort of stuff. And haptics is sort of starting to come into phones. If you read some of the marketing literature around phones, when you get a touch the screen, you'll feel a little click, and that's a haptic response as well.
Okay, yes. Now, in regards to advanced motion simulators for military use or any other use, can you explain your research into these?
Yeah, look, I'm part of a broader research team looking at all sorts of things and using robots for motion platforms. So traditionally we use these things called Stewart platforms, very expensive, sort of look like a spider kind of thing where you sit on top and it can rock and roll you probably around 10 degrees. So it gives you a little bit of motion, maybe 20 degrees, side to side, up and down kind of thing.
Like a mechanic bull, sort of?
A bit like, yeah, that's right.
That's straight where my mind
exactly.
went.
So that's kind of, the state of the art up until a couple of years ago. And certainly, once again, Deakin's been looking at this new technology using industrial robots effectively. So robots that traditionally would have been used to manufacture cars. And we basically strap a person to the end of these, and it's probably a little bit more complex than that. There's a lot of safety involved. But we can pull upwards of 6G, so 6 times the force of gravity. We can put you upside down. We can give you a real hard time. So if we're simulating a military vehicle or a race car or a helicopter or a plane, and you roll the vehicle over, you will literally be upside down. So the mechanical bulls can't do that. You end up upside down on a mechanical bull, but you can't do it.
So it's sort of just picking the person up, like it's not.
Yeah, there's a seat on the end. There's a cockpit,
such.
and basically you build the cockpit of whatever you're simulating. So a race car or a helicopter, and you put it on the end of this robot. The trainee thinks that they're in this cockpit and they're driving, racing, flying as if they were in a real vehicle.
So do you know what it's like to crash a race car or a helicopter?
Have
you been in
crashed
there?
A lot of things. So yeah, but the first use of this technology was helicopter simulation. So I guess I may know how to fly a helicopter. I haven't tried it in the real world.
You know how to crash a helicopter?
Certainly crashed helicopters many a times, and jets and all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Do any sort of like general public get to have a go at these? Like I know sometimes at events you see the little virtual reality type goggles that you put on, but in terms of these big sort of robotics that you're working on.
Yeah, look, it's amazing what happens behind closed doors in the research labs and R&D facilities around the world, and Australia is no different. And I think Australia really is leading the way in a number of these technologies. But come back to your question, the public, we certainly come to the open days and come and see, and we open up the labs and people can come and have a go.
Give you a call and say, James, can I come and crash a robot?
I'm sure we can come do I'm sure we can get you into that.
Can I crash a helicopter? Can I? Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably where the big money is in entertainment, I think. So we've probably been working the wrong spaces all these years. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Now, you helped design something called Flame Trainer. What is this and how does that work?
So I guess this is a technology that combines a couple of my passions. So I've been a firefighter for 25 years in Victoria here, and this is a technology that enables us to place firefighters in virtual environments, car crashes, car fires, building fires, ship fires, whatever we can think of, we can build in the virtual environment. But we have a number of supporting technologies, so we can heat the person up to simulate their exposure to the fire, depending on how close they are and their position above ground and things like that. And then we have a hose line that uses a real firefighting branch or nozzle that enables them to squirt the water, and they get the jet reaction or the kickback force of that hose. So it's a workout. So people come out of this system sweating. It's a system designed so that we can put trainee firefighters into unique situations that they might only see once or twice in their career, or do that repetitive training that's very expensive, environmentally unfriendly or dangerous repetitively, so they can get those skill sets up.
Yeah, and I guess you're getting all their physiological sensors firing, so they learn how to sort of curb that when they're in that,
so
the heat of the moment.
We see it makes a big difference in sort of their muscle control and muscle memory of how to fight a fire, but we're also putting them in situations that they don't see very often, and we want people to make mistakes in this virtual environment. We want them to learn from these mistakes and push reset and go again. So, traditionally in the real world, you don't get too many second chances, but in VR, that's the real benefit, is we can put you into these scenarios 100 times until you get it right.
Yeah, okay. And do you obviously get to trial the flame trainer yourself, and having that fire fighting background, does that help you a little bit in virtual reality? Yeah,
look, I'm a big kid, so I try everything. So certainly the background helps. And once again, we've got a team, and this is a technology that's spun out into a company, so Deakin takes a number of these sort of concepts that they build in the research labs and spins them out as companies, and Flame now is supplying this technology all around the world. So clients in Europe, America, New Zealand, all over Australia that are using this to train firefighters. So it's really exciting to see something come full range from a concept in the lab all the way through to a commercial product.
Yeah, wow. And it's really combining two of your passions, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, as I said, I'm a third-generation firefighter, been in the fire industry, I guess, for 25 years, or realistically all my life. I grew up riding the fire truck with Dad when I was 5, and unfortunately you can't do that kind of thing anymore. So how do we give kids and people experiences so that they might decide to do firefighting and become a volunteer or join the fire service when they're older? How do you do that these days? And virtual reality is another enabler of that kind of experience.
Yeah, right. Well, you rode around in the fire truck. I got dropped to school in the ambulance. So there you go.
Yeah.
Things that happen in the country.
And certainly this technology really is about, medical training as well. How do you train people to experience road crash and all those things that you will see? How do you train people for that? And virtual reality is a great use case for that.
And so you've been in a really intense fire situation, I assume, being a firefighter for 20 years or so, you were saying, and then stepping into that virtual reality suit. Is it a suit as such?
Yeah, look, the firefighters wear pretty much the same gear that you would wear at the fire. So, but inside that has heat pads that heat you up. We've got all the same equipment that you hold in your hands. So that sort of training and muscle memory kicks in. And we just want to give you that experiential type stuff. So some people might wait 10 years before they see a certain type of car accident or a certain type of bushfire. or they, depending on where they are in the state, they might not see it at all. Gas bullet fires and things like that. Electric vehicles is a good example. We're going to see more and more electric vehicles on the roads. How do we train people to fight fires in them, and how are they different to petrol-powered cars or diesel-powered cars? So we can give you all that experience, hopefully, before you see it in the real world.
So having done both, is it quite similar? Like being in the VR, you're like, yep, this is very similar? Or are you sort of like, in the real situation, I'm still, you're still further pushed to the test, I guess, a little bit?
Oh, look, nothing beats the real world, obviously, but we're trying to bring the heart rate up and get people making mistakes and really working hard in the virtual world, so that, we use the term, train virtually, experience reality. It's really about putting people in that real situation as real as possible using current technology, I guess. But we find that firefighters around the world are using it. They're using it because they see that it is as close as they can get to the real world, safely, I guess.
This episode is presented by Deakin University. You can find all of the show notes and other great content related to this chat at disruptor.deakin.edu.au or find us on socials at Deakin Research. Robots for law enforcement, what sort of research have you done in this sort of space?
Yeah, so once again, sort of technology coming out of Deakin. We've got a good team working in this space, and this is sort of robots that are used for police. Things like bomb response, hostage negotiation, siege resolution, things like that. So these are robots ranging from small, the size of a box of tissues, all the way up to a motorbike size, or a bit bigger than a four-wheel drive motorbike sort of size, with tracks and arms and all sorts of things on them that they can punch through walls, they can go and open doors, they can open cars, open the boot or open doors of cars and that sort of stuff. And these robots have been used by police around Australia, and I think we believe they're the only Australian-made robots that are in service with police. And some of our robots have been shot, some of them have been surrendered to, so it's really interesting to work with police and understand their challenges and their needs and build technologies that can assist them.
Yeah, okay. And so how do you ever see like a future with actual robot police, like where they're sort of you're being pulled over and there's police robots walking around? Like how far are we off something like that we've seen in some of the sci-fi movies?
Well, look, I think we are quite a fair way. The technology is evolving quite quickly, but if we looked at the sci-fi movies of the 80s and 90s, I guess it's robots are really hard to build. They're really challenging. Our environments aren't built for the robots of today, and there's some amazing stuff happening, obviously. And as I said before, it's mainly being driven by military applications that then filter down into the home. But I guess if I had $1 for every time someone said, build me a robot to do the dishes or do the housework, I'd be rich. And I guess that's perhaps where iRobot's doing right with their vacuum cleaners, and that's what a dishwasher's for, right? So
so do you think there'll be a time where we have just sort of robots walking around with us humans, or a time where robots are doing things for us, can say sort of, can you make me a sandwich, and they'll, get everything out of the fridge and not sort of break down exactly what they need to do, but they'll be sort of intelligent.
So that's a real AI, high-level control stuff. And short answer is yes. We're seeing now robots are starting to go into the delivery service. So we're going to start to see more and more robots running around on our footpaths delivering.
Robot.
Uber Eats will be and cars is a good example of that. We're starting to see that autonomous cars really can drive everywhere and are quite safe. And I guess will our kids ever drive? And probably the answer is no, I would suggest.
Oh wow!
So I think in the next 10 to 20 years we'll start to see that a lot of cars are coming out that generally most people wouldn't touch the steering wheel. And
it will be quite hard to crash cars into each other, won't it, I guess, if that's the case, because they'll stop themselves.
Look, when we get to a position where all cars are autonomous and robotic, that's where we've got cars travelling within a few centimetres of each other at high speeds and moving and manoeuvring. improving our road utilisation, that'll be fantastic. But the problem is that transition period where you've got people driving that aren't quite as quick in their responses as the robots. How do you integrate? And that's where all the research is at the moment about how you put autonomous cars on a road with people. If we had roads that were just autonomous, it would be much easier.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating to think about, isn't it? That, the next generation might not actually have to sort of steer the car or...
Yeah, imagine all the productivity will improve, just kicking back, reading the newspaper on the laptop.
Watch TV.
While
driving.
Yeah, have a snooze.
You'll be able to get on your phone.
Everyone will be much more rested,
We
I'm sure.
don't condone that, though.
Exactly.
Oh, that's just, it's so interesting to think about. And when I order Uber Eats at some point and Uber robot turns up, I'm going to think of you, James.
Won't be far off.
10 years' time. What sort of real world problems are we designing robots for at the moment?
I guess there's a few different areas, and I would class the automotive sector as one of those. So if we talk about cars, that there's a lot of research and a lot of money being spent on that autonomy of cars. And once again, we probably won't see people owning cars maybe as much in the future, because you'll walk out the front, a car will pull up, you'll hop in and it'll take you to where you want to go.
Without a driver in
Without a driver, yeah. So, Uber, we mentioned Uber before, they're spending a lot of money on that, and that's certainly their goal.
So Uber will just buy cars instead of having... having to employ drivers.
That's their business model, is they're using people
1-3
now.
cabs if you're listening.
Yeah, they're using people now because the technology isn't quite there, but they're investing heavily, and that's their business model, is to have autonomous vehicles. I guess the other thing, we're seeing a lot of prosthetics work and a lot of work around rehabilitation of injury and people that have accidents, and hopefully we won't see as many, I guess, if we've all got autonomous vehicles. But that's another big field, I guess.
Bit of a change of pace here. I read in your bio about the idea of human in the loop and human on the loop. What is this?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure which bio you're reading, but that sounds pretty dry, doesn't it? No, this is a really cool sort of concept that came about from one of my bosses, actually, Professor Saeed Nahavandi, around understanding how we control robots and how we interact with robots. So human in the loop is where you're effectively controlling, and to use your analogy before, a radio control car to drive it over to the fridge, or drive a robot over to the fridge, open the fridge door, grab the sandwich ingredients and put it together by telling it how to control it with a joystick effectively. Whereas human on the loop is giving a high level command, sort of saying to the robot, much like Google voice assistant, or Apple on your phone, Siri, please send something to go and make me a sandwich. And the assistant knows what kind of sandwich you like. It goes to the fridge, finds out what it's got in there, and tries to make the best sandwich that makes you happy, I guess. So that's that really artificial intelligence linkage where it's looked at you over the past your entire life effectively, and understanding what you like, and taking those voice commands to go and do something like that.
Yeah, and I guess there comes a bit of a social aspect. Sometimes we talk to inanimate objects as if they're real as well. These things are going to be talking, moving, doing things for us.
And that's the scary thing. We've got this great relationship with our phones at the moment, and screen time coming up on your phone and telling you how many hours a day you're spending looking at your little screen is quite scary. So
very scary. Yes.
I'd like to hope that we can free up some of the mundane tasks with robots and allow more time for people to actually talk to each other at the personal level.
You haven't got anyone there, but you've got a robot to talk to. That's very interesting too, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And we're seeing that we've got a lot of aging populations around the world, and Japan's certainly one of the biggest, and there's a lot of research going on into robot companions. So being able to have a robot there that you can talk to, that you can interact with, and it might not be a robot person, it might be a robot pet effectively.
Yeah.
But they're listening to you, they're gesturing, it comes across that they're understanding you, but they're giving you that sort of companionship.
Yeah, and like a robot dog, I guess, if you forget to feed it, or, you've locked it inside with no water or something like that.
Yeah, probably won't chew through the door.
It's not going to matter a whole lot, I guess.
Robots have feelings too.
Yes,
I'm just saying. Yeah.
That's what I'd be like, yeah. That's your tagline.
Yeah,
Robots have feelings too. What are the main ethical concerns with the future of robotics, do you think?
Well, look, certainly the military aspects of robots is quite a scary one, and there's been a lot of research and government-level discussions around the use of robotics for warfare. We stay on the very humanitarian side of robots for counter-ID work and bomb disposal and things like that, but there's certainly the technology exists now for robots to make the decision on whether to pull the trigger effectively or not in the war zones, and governments certainly don't. Most of the governments in the world certainly don't want that kind of technology to exist, and that's when we talk about that human in or human on the loop. These kind of decisions in warfare certainly should rest with the person. That's a little bit deep and serious, isn't it?
And do you think there are countries that have these sort of military weaponry robots already?
Yeah. They certainly exist now, and can be placed in an area to deny the enemy entry into that area and make the decisions on their own about whether to shoot or not, and that's quite a scary thing.
How are robots going to help us in the future, or helping us now in particular with things like, earthquakes or mass disasters?
Yeah, I think there's probably two answers to that. One's the healthcare, and we spoke about the ageing population before. We're going to need more people to help people around. So whether it's assisting lifting, helping people shower, helping look after people, or as a companion, there's certainly a lot of work going into that space. And the disaster relief is certainly an exciting one as well. There's a lot of research happening in robots that can, snake-like robots that can crawl into rubble and get towards trapped
looking
people, for people, small swarming robots, robot teams that can help lift things, so robot ants and things like that. So there's a lot of research happening in that space.
Robot ants?
Yeah, so an ant can lift 20 times its own body weight, whereas when we get to that with robots, we can send them into rubble and lift heavy things off people and really working together as a team to accomplish a goal.
Unbelievable. Robot ants. There you go. I've learned about that today as well.
We're probably not quite as small as an ant yet, but one day.
And can you foresee any issues with having a future full of robots?
Oh, look, I think we need to be very aware of the social implications of robots, I guess. Much like, as I said before, we're spending too much time on our phones. We just don't want to spend too much time with our robots, I guess. It is a slow burn, robots, and I think if you look back into history in the 70s and 80s, we probably thought most homes would have a robot in them now doing all the stuff that we don't want to do. We're still a fair way away from that, I believe, probably 10 to 20 years. But, I think that's probably the biggest thing, the social impact. I think when robots came into manufacturing, everyone assumed that we'd lose a lot of manufacturing workers, and that's not generally the case. The figures sort of show that the trades change, and we put the robots into the dirty, dangerous jobs, and it's a changing population. We talk about the percentage of people that won't be doing the job they're doing now in 20 years, and it's quite high, but there's going to be plenty of work to do. So we need to be mindful that robots aren't necessarily scary and going to take all our jobs away.
What sort of jobs in particular do you think they'll be taking over first?
Probably podcasts, I'd suggest.
Yeah.
So they'd be
mine's
doing all the podcasts. No,
all the robot podcasts. Yeah.
Look, I think we've got a population that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're going to have to push more robotics into farming. I think that's probably a big area. Farmers still need to make the decisions, but they can probably send some autonomous tractors out there doing some of the work. And that's starting to happen now.
Yeah, we do. We already have the headers, I guess, that can,
and
via
generally
GPS.
We still have a person in them, but in the future that won't be the case. The farmers will be able to go and do more of the other things that they need to do around the property. So
and just send the header out to do the harvest.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So we'll plough the field or do the seeding, whatever
Milk the
it
cow.
is. Yeah. Well, we're seeing robotic dairies already.
Yes.
They haven't really taken off, I guess, but we will see that we're freeing up more time from that monotonous work that perhaps can lead to injury due to people falling asleep potentially, I guess.
So what's one thing you'd change or put in place now to stop some of these issues happening?
So I guess I've watched all the movies about what can go wrong, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So for our people out there that watch Terminator, we certainly don't want that. We need to be very careful about our laws and ethics around use of robots in the military, and we don't want to get in a situation where we've got robots deciding to pull the trigger effectively. That comes down to law enforcement, military, whatever. We need to make sure that our robots are following certain laws of robotics, and I think most roboticists go back to Isaac Asimov and his 3 laws of robotics around, a robot shouldn't hurt someone, a robot shouldn't through inaction hurt someone. We just need to make sure that we're following those rules, and that governments are legislating that effectively there's no autonomy or automation that can endanger people.
And how do you sort of enforce that? Is it through government laws? Like obviously in Australia it's sort of, I guess, easy, but in other countries it might be a little bit harder.
Yeah, look, it's got to be. And there's a heap of robot ethicists and government agencies working together in this space at the moment to try and make sure that we're not introducing robots into warfare that aren't potentially going to make that wrong decision, and we want to make sure that people are in the loop or on the loop at all times in these decision-making processes.
Now, James, we've got the fast few questions for you now. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, let's strap in. So the first thing that comes to your mind, just give us your quickest and first answer.
Sounds dangerous.
So what's the best piece of advice you've been given on your path to success?
Look, I think it's just do what you enjoy. I sort of came out of nowhere from a small town into the robotics space. I wanted to build robots. I'm not sure why, but I came in and did an engineering degree and loved it. And you've got to do what you enjoy. If you enjoy working with wood, go and be a woodworker. If you enjoy building robots, go and do a degree and learn how to build robots. But don't go into a job that you don't like.
If you could recommend one book to the younger generation to get them on the right path to ensure our Earth's future, what would it be?
One book, yeah. I guess I started off as a probably 3 or 4 year old with a little picture book of robots from the early 1980s, probably 70s, I guess, and that's what got me into robots. I loved reading as a child, so I wouldn't recommend one book. I'd recommend all of them. Go and read all books and find out what interests you. But one book, I'm not going to answer that.
Excellent. Read all the books.
All of them, yeah.
And James, if your life was a movie, what would it be called and who would star in it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It's I'm a big Avengers fan at the moment.
Me too. Love it.
I think it'd have to be, am I allowed to say Robert Downey Jr. or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Iron Man, he's a robot, isn't he?
Yeah, and no spoilers. I can't talk about the latest movie, can we? Yet.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah. No, anyway.
Oh, you know what? We probably can.
No, we better not.
No, we better not. Okay. Yeah. I've already seen it.
And what would it be called? I'm not sure.
Is that the name?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Probably. I guess, my motto in everything I do is fail fast, fail early, make mistakes and move on from them. So, just have a crack at something in the robotic space or whatever you do. Do it safely, but try something new, and that's where all the invention and innovation comes from. Is having a crack at something, finding out what goes wrong, and then moving forward.
Wonderful. Well, I have learnt so much in this episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, James. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Lovely to be here. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, James. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to review, subscribe, and share with your friends.